Well, God, no, it's taking the time to heal. We'll be unstoppable. Don't know what I did it for. I needed to know that it was always real. Our heads held high when we walk down the line, honey, on and on through the clear night sky. Let's be at peace, we'll fly. Our hearts collide. Can't escape the magnetic side. Eyes like a satellite spinning away, almost lost forever and leaving no trace, floating through the darkest reaches of space to another galaxy. Our polarity shifted around. There's nothing else left holding us down, and it's just gravitational. We are unstoppable. I just can't escape the pull. We are unstoppable.
Right. We're at 11 o'clock and we'll just keep admitting people into the waiting room.
We
Please
are
join the Women's Leadership Session in Climate Action.
Our heads held high when we walk down the line, honey, on and on through the clear night sky. Let's be at peace, we'll fly. Our hearts collide, can't escape the magnetic side. Eyes like a satellite spinning away, almost lost forever and leaving no trace, floating through the darkest reaches of space to another galaxy. Our polarity shifted around. There was nothing else left holding us down, but it's just gravitational. We are unstoppable. We are unstoppable. We are unstoppable.
Great. We're just about a minute in. So we'll keep an eye on the waiting room. I know in the last session, people were joining at all various times. So I'll ask all of the panelists who are co-hosts to keep an eye there too, in case I miss anybody. So first of all, welcome to this discussion on how environmental and social justice can be woven into our daily interactions and integrate into how women lead. As climate change becomes a top concern for many organizations and individuals, we do want to start this conversation together, share impacts from a global to a local level, empower you to make a difference within your sphere, and then provide opportunities to continue learning after this conference. So the thought is to put all of this into action. Let's first start with some wise words read by our San Mateo County Poet Laureate. There you go, Eileen.
Thank you, Anisha. This poem is for all climate activists and restorers, because when we empower women, we also empower the earth. Calling All Grandmothers by Alice Walker. We have to live differently, or we will die in the same old ways. Therefore, I call on all grandmothers everywhere on the planet to rise and take your place in the leadership of the world. Come out of the kitchen, out of the fields, out of the beauty parlors, out of the television. Step forward and assume the role for which you were created. To lead humanity to health, happiness, and sanity. I call on all the grandmothers of Earth and every person who possesses the grandmother spirit of respect for life and protection of the young to rise and lead. The life of our species depends on it. And I call on all men of earth to gracefully and gratefully stand aside and let us do so. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Eileen. I really appreciate you joining our session for that. So a couple little housekeeping tips for those of you who may be newer to Zoom. We will be pinning the speakers, so you will see the panelists on your screen. You're always welcome to play around up in the upper right-hand corner. You can see how you can change it from gallery to speaker. You're welcome to do that. Along the lower menu, you'll see how you can do things with reactions or even within the chat. If you'd like to use the closed caption where you see subtitles along the bottom, you would select live transcript at the bottom of your screen. And all of us are going to be camera on, and you're welcome to be camera on or off. I am going to keep you muted until we get to the Q&A session at the end, and we will be keeping an eye here on the Zoom chat. Becky is also watching the chat on Huva on her phone, but just to make it easier, if you are in Zoom, go ahead and type in your thoughts, questions, even your reactions. You can interact with each other there, indicating your active listening with written comments, smiles, nods as you're leaning into the conversation. And what we'll do is first move into introducing ourselves. And rather than a traditional bio or resume, which you can find on LinkedIn, so if you are in the Huva platform and you go to the speaker section, you're able to see for each of the speakers, their LinkedIn URL is listed within their profile. But instead, what we're going to do is give you a glimpse into our life journey. And I feel that this brings more humanity to the interaction that we have with each other today. So kicking us off, I'm Anisha. My dad was from Switzerland, mom from Holland. They came to Palo Alto. There's my family. We're us kids, 3 kids, are first generation here. We spent our summers going back to Europe and camping, outdoors, and you'll notice 3 areas that I loved as a child were soccer and skiing and hiking. I then went off to University of Oregon for undergrad and moved to Switzerland afterwards, worked up in Derby Hotel in Davos, then in the Rothschild Bank in Zurich, came back, worked at Stanford for a couple of years, and then got my MBA at University of San Francisco. So you see I stuck with the green and yellow. And then I went to Accenture, and from there to Primitive Logic, and now with Logic 2020. And some of the things that I just love and are interests of mine are traveling, the environment, gardening, my family, my friends, and then of course to stay curious, never stop learning. And I'm one of the commissioners here on the Commission on Status of Women.
Hi all, I'm Suba Rajana. Anisha, I just started without your prompt. Hope that's all right. As you can see, I came to US, about 30 plus years ago. I was just like contemplating the other day. I spent more of my life here in US than in India. So my mom is my inspiration in everything I do. You can see her picture here. I have a family of, we are a family of 4. I live in Bay Area with my husband and 2 children. I got my master's at University of Texas at El Paso in environmental engineering. I started my career as an environment engineer, and I am very well aware of what climate change is, from a very early on, as I was involved in hazardous waste cleanup sites, and what human actions or lack of human actions can do to our environment. And I've been an entrepreneur pretty much all my life. I participated Vedams, which was started by other founders, and in 2016 I started Biarca. From environmental engineering, I transitioned into software. And so now I have the advantage of combining my knowledge with technology as well. And as far as my interests and the causes that I'm interested is education is, right on the top, followed by women leadership and mentorship. And those are the two causes that are very close to my heart. And I'm an advisory board member on Pratham, which is a educational nonprofit. And I am also part of How Women Invest, where we do gender lens focused investing, like, invest in women founded and technology enabled companies. And as just like Anisha, I'm a very curious learner and continuing education. So I start to do that, like, I do those things, with whatever the educational opportunity that is presented to me. I'm also a community leader locally in the city that I live in, and I participate in various causes and, wherever I could make a difference and influence policy making and decisions, I try to do that. And as far as my interest goes, I love reading and I love hiking. As you can see, our family of hiking, the photo there. And that's about it. And I'm very happy to be part of this discussion today with you all and other panelists that we have here.
Thank you, Suba. I think Jane, you're next.
Great, thanks, Suba. And I was just thinking as Suba was talking that we have yet to meet in person because we've done this a couple times on Zoom, but I'm Jane Batty. It's very nice to meet everyone. I've been an environmental champion my entire life, from growing up in Connecticut on the Connecticut River to coming to California in the early 1980s. I am a business owner. I own Miramar Farms, where we do have a small family farm. And we also host leadership teams to come together and deal with some of the most pressing challenges of the day. And particularly, of course, we're hosting a lot of environmental organizations, but also biotech and technology from across the area. I'm also vice chair of the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board, and I'm a board member of American Leadership Forum, Silicon Valley. And in all this work, my focus is heavily on environmental stewardship. I'm also a wife and a mother. I have 3 grown children and now 3 grandchildren. And of course, they are an inspiration, and they are part of what gives me hope for the future. I've also been a resident of the Coastside for over 30 years, and the Coastside is a pretty special place. So I think after 30 years, I'm finally a local. I'm almost a native, but I'm definitely a local. I've worked my entire career in the environmental field, from starting my own company that did environmental compliance work for large-scale construction, to working as the lead of an environmental nonprofit that was funding land stewardship and programs for kids. And then I took a position about 10 years ago with Pacific Gas and Electric Company and ran the environmental team for them for about 10 years. But really, my love now is really all about Miramar Farms, and my work is very much about gathering, learning, and growing, and bringing people together to do those things. So I think that's it for me, Anisha, and I'll pass it on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jane. Olivia, I believe you're up next.
Thank you, Anisha. Good morning, all. It's so nice to meet you virtually. I'm Olivia White Lopez. I use she, they pronouns, and I identify as multiracial and a dual national. So my mom is Guatemalan. She immigrated from Guatemala in the 80s, and my dad is US born and of European descent. I think it's, for me, helpful to share that while I'm born in the US and very white presenting, a good 80% of my family lives in Guatemala, as you can see in that nice photo at the top. So I grew up in Florida, and unlike Jane, I have not spent my entire career in this sector. I'm relatively new. And I'm also relatively new to being more embracing of the outdoors. Where I grew up in Florida is very hot and humid, and I fainted a lot. But moving to California back in 2010, I really grew to love the outdoors and connect to nature. And I'm so thrilled to now be working for the Peninsula Open Space Trust, a lands trust that is headquartered in Palo Alto. So my background in the nonprofit sector spans 15 years in the arts, volunteer engagement, workforce development, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, with a strong focus in particular on race equity. So I'm very excited to bridge my passion for people, diversity, equity, inclusion, and conservation with POST.
Then I'll round us out. My name is Becky Abens. I am a former commissioner on the Commission on the Status of Women. I grew up in Texas, which is a weird place to me, but it shaped who I am, and until I had to escape to the West Coast. 24 years ago, I left earlier. My friends were not sad when I left Houston because they thought I would be back in 6 months. And that was 24 years ago. But I started my early career with working with crime victims at the district attorney's office in Houston. And then progressed. I've done, been involved in some angel investing, spent some degree, a fair amount of time as a litigation consultant, and now work in the biotech space doing healthcare compliance and corporate ethics. My things that are important to me are my family, my friends, travel, good food, good wine. The picture on the lower left corner is this past December, we celebrated my father's 90th birthday. So I'm hoping I have that longevity in my genes. Making a contribution is also something that is at my core. I spent 11 years on the Commission on the Status of Women. I also have spent a lot of years volunteering with CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, working with both children and youth in the criminal justice and foster care systems. And also then my very senior dog gets much of my time. So I'm going to punt back to Anisha to get us rolling.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm putting a question into the chat for everybody as I pull up our, and actually, am I pulling it up or are you, Becky? I've got the video ready to go if you want me to do that.
You?
Perfect. Okay.
Good, thank you.
So I did put a question in the chat for all of our audience, and you can think about that and add it into the chat while I pull up this video for us to watch real quick.
The leaders of today, not 2030, not 2050, let's make this choice. It is in our hands. And our people and our planet need it more than ever. We can work with who is ready to go because the train is ready to leave. And those who are not yet ready, we need to continue to ring circle and to remind them that their people, not our people, but their citizens need them to get on board as soon as possible. Code red.
Can you guys all hear it? Yeah, perfect.
Code red to the G7 countries. Code red to the G20. Earth to top. That's what it says. Earth to top. For those who have eyes to see, those who have ears to listen, and for those who have a heart to feel, 1.5 is what we need to survive. 2 degrees. Yes, that's true. The death sentence to the people of Antigua and Barbados, to the people of the Maldives, to the people of Dominica and Fiji, to the people of Kenya and Mozambique, and yes, to the people of Samoa and Barbados. We do not want that dreaded death sentence. And we've come here today to say, try harder, because our people, the climate army, the world, the planet, needs our actions now, not next year, not in the next decade. Thank you.
So we wanted to share that excerpt from the video, which features the Prime Minister of Barbados at the Global Climate Summit, of how just even a small island nation is making big waves. And now we're going to move into our panel. And first up, I've got Jane. And I will pin all of you in a moment. But let's just start with you. How have you personally changed the way that you live and work in response to the climate change?
Thanks. Had to take myself off mute there for a minute. Thanks, Anisha. I was thinking about this question just before we got on this morning. And, I think I've changed a lot of things. And what's interesting is that the climate change issue, the climate impact issue has been going on for decades. So, my change is not immediate. It's been happening over a long period of time. And I think I'm going to talk about three things. The first is I mentioned about 10 years ago, I left a job that I loved. Actually, it was in land conservation and youth development in the environmental arena. And I took a corporate job at Pacific Gas and Electric Company. And I have to say at the time, all my friends were like, what are you thinking? You and a corporate job was the first question. And secondly, PG&E was the first question. And then the second question was PG&E. But it was an opportunity to help build utility scale renewable infrastructure. And it was amazing. And a real opportunity to shift where we get our energy from to renewable sources. And so, that's one big change I made. The second was then deciding to leave PG&E and start Miramar Farms, where we could connect with a lot more people and try to share the message around stewardship. And the line in the poem that was read at the beginning, we have to live differently, really hit me hard. And so Miramar Farms allows us to really can both demonstrate environmental stewardship, but connect with a lot more people. I'm going to mention two more things. One is I had heard that there was an opening on the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is part of the State Water Board water quality management system. And it's a governor's appointment. And so I submitted an application. You can do this easily. And I was able to get through the process and get the appointment, and I'm vice chair. And so that's an opportunity to really affect policy for the state of California, not just our region, yes, for sure, but our region is also a leader in the state on this topic. So that's been another thing. And then the last I'm going to mention, I'm probably talk about later, is waste management. That's like my favorite topic these days, is how much of our garbage can we move over to more renewable waste management. I'll talk more about that later, but that's the one that's top of mind right now. It's the easiest one.
I love it. And something that we can all do. Suba, serving a purpose and making a difference is often a common theme in our conversations with each other. So how has climate action caught your attention?
Yeah. So, I grew up in India for about 22 years. And growing up, we were always taught to conserve water and food because of our access to, lack of abundance of it, right? You don't waste food, you don't waste water. So it's kind of ingrained in me. And then later on, when I chose my career path, which is environmental engineering, that taught me several things like, about climate change and, what we need to do and what we shouldn't be doing, right? However, because of whatever happened, in my life and, the urgency of other things, I have focused on individual actions of making decisions for me and my family and modeling for my children, mindfully, what we eat and where we buy our food and, how do we garden, how do we minimize the waste, and how do we support local buyers, like local farmers through farmers market. using renewable energy. So it kind of reflected in all the decisions that, we've been making. So like today, my kids actually they do make some of these decisions, consciously about what they do as well. So, however, lately I've been realizing that it's not just about individual actions, because that needs to be there, but also about the advocacy for community, state, and regional level is becoming more and more evident, and it's needed very much. So that is where I kind of started putting my foot, I just, by the way, I just sold my company. So I have some time that I wanted to spend, how do I get involved more in policy making and more advocacy related? My favorite topic is education and awareness. And I feel that is where the actual change starts, once we know what needs to be done and what is the problem, what are the solutions that are out there. And that's where I want to focus more and more. And especially talking to Jane and Olivia, during our preparation for this conference, I realized that there is a lot of need, and I can contribute there as well. So today, I hope we can start such community here where we could actively participate, in the community and invest in the community by technology investment, and participate in policy making, and make the government and community accountable for its success. So that is where I would like to contribute more and more. And definitely, individual actions are very, very important. But advocacy for a community involvement is very much needed as well.
And I think you brought up a good point, and I'm going to go to Olivia on that. Olivia, what do you think prevents people from taking action on climate change?
Thanks, Anisha. Yeah, I can speak for myself very much here because, as I mentioned, I'm newer to this space. I joined my new organization, which is a land trust, only 7 months ago. And I think for me personally, it's such an overwhelming problem. There's so many things happening globally. We can read about it daily. And it feels really difficult as an individual person to have an impact. So what I've been coming to more and more in my personal life and also aligning in my career is just trying to figure out what is my span of control and what do I feel comfortable having any form of impact on. So that could be my own household, how I manage my household. It could be my local neighborhood or community, checking in to see what's needed regionally here. It could be supporting. Oh, I think we need to mute someone. Thank you. It could be supporting my workplace and thinking about how do they manage their recycling. That's been an issue in the past for me in various organizations. So I think as I get more comfortable in terms of understanding my span of control, I can see my circle of influence also growing and see how I feel more and more confident and comfortable weighing in on issues at larger scales. But I think for everybody, just really knowing what you are comfortable in and what you want to have the most impact on that's the best thing you can do.
I like it. And I like how you made it real for, what is it for you? And then understanding, how we can all be thinking down that same path. And then Jane, building on that, what gives you hope for the future? I know you mentioned it in your initial bio and especially with the grandkids, but how do you stay optimistic in these challenging times?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Olivia's right. I mean, so many people feel so overwhelmed by the problem, and there is a question of where do you start? But in sort of, I don't know, an ironic way here in 2022, we find ourselves with more tools than ever to go after climate change. And so I'm so glad you asked this question because, if you read about the potential impacts, fire, floods, etc., it is very frightening. But if you also read about that, California alone is sending $750 million into the economy for sea level rise and climate adaptation and local planning. So California is really sending money after this. The federal government is as well. So we've never seen this level of investment happening. And we've been talking about this problem for a long time. So that's the first thing that gives me hope. The second is the amount of intellect we see now going after this problem. I am not the only person that said, I'm done with this other work. I've got to find a job where I can be more directly impactful around climate. And there are hundreds of thousands of people doing this right now. So I'm hopeful given the intellectual capacity. And I'm going to turn the camera for just 1 second because I have my intern here, 18 years old, who is, working on the farm and wanting to listen to this program today because, it is JC's future. It is my grandkids' future. And so people are really paying attention to this. And when I listen at the water board meetings to the level of talent that is coming into the water board, and the educational backgrounds folks have, that makes me very hopeful. And then the last thing I'm going to say is a little bit on the dark side, which is there's no more denying this. We've seen the fires, the air quality impacts, and that is impacting huge swaths of our population. I don't want to say everyone, but really just about everyone. And so from, the wealthiest communities of California to the poorest, we are all feeling this. And so there's no more denying what's happening. And so that's really making a lot more happen. And so I am hopeful, a little bit nervous at times, nervous about this summer, but still hopeful.
I'm right there with you. And I like that you shared your intern right there on the camera, because I did want to ask Suba, and this was one of our early conversations even last fall, that you mentioned that your kids have been bringing this up a lot more, and you've been reading about the environment and climate change and talking with your family. What are some of the thoughts and concerns that you're hearing from your kids and from the younger generation?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, because this has been something that's, I'm becoming very fond of talking nowadays. My children have been aware of climate change and its impact from a very young age because of the way that we modeled it for them. And nowadays, what I'm learning from them is about the social justice aspect of climate change and how it is impacting some communities, especially the health aspects and having access to healthy food, living in clean, safe housing and neighborhoods, and most importantly, personal safety for women and girls. My observation is that young generation's decision-making is taking the environment and social justice aspect into consideration right from the beginning, but not an afterthought. They do consider that as part of their decision criteria in whatever the decisions they're making. And this thought process truly inspires me. And as one Native American proverb says, we do not inherit this earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children. And that's very powerful to me. And today's young generation has been an inspiration for me in more ways than I can count, which fundamentally influenced my thinking. So I'm learning a lot, every day by the way their actions, and they share their thoughts, and their speaking out, and all these things. Truly, I'm thankful for that.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for sharing just kind of from a personal and family perspective. And then, that leads me to my question for Olivia. And this is building a little bit on what Suba was just talking about of what can the conservation and climate change movements do to engage more people in this work and also look to those younger generations?
Yeah, thank you. So that is, at the heart of the work I'm trying to do with my organization right now. We're actually going through a strategic planning effort to think about what are we doing to engage local communities? How can we be responsive to community needs? And I would say broadly, any organization that works in climate action, conservation, it's of utmost importance to listen to your community members. And I mean, all of them. I think there's a real history of exclusion in climate action. And it's important to know who hasn't been heard fully, who hasn't been centered in the work. I think the environmental justice sector gets it right. They know to start at the neighborhood level, at the community level, movement building level. And I would say if you're an individual looking to get more engaged with organizations like conservation organizations, climate action organizations. I recommend you find your local land trusts, your local environmental justice organization, or urban greening organization, and see what they need. There's always oftentimes opportunities to volunteer, to support in fundraising, et cetera. For me personally, I mentioned a background in volunteer engagement. I have always found that any social change that I engaged in is tenfold stronger when I find community. So I highly recommend that anybody, both on the land trust and conservation side and on the individual side, you build and you find community. If it doesn't exist, you might be the person that needs to start it in your next door neighborhood. And on that point, I just wanted to say too, I think as a personal offer, because I myself, when I landed in the Bay Area, I felt very new and very unsure. And if there's anyone on this call that happens to be unsure about what resources are available to them, I'm more than happy to talk about how to get engaged in your local environmental movement. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or via email.
That's powerful. I like that. And thank you for putting that offer out there. Just quick reminder to everybody, if you're looking at the Whova platform and you go to the speaker section, you will find people's LinkedIns and you can contact them, just as Olivia put out there. So now that we've heard a little bit from the panelists, I feel like we could just keep going on and on and on. It's so hard to try to fit this into a short period of time. I'm going to put a question in the chat for the audience if you want to play and add some things in there. And while you add your notes or just what you think some of the actions are that you're currently doing, or actions that have caught your attention, feel free to flood the chat with that if you like. And we're just going to move into our final round with the panelists. As you look forward, knowing the challenges and opportunities we face as a society, how is your approach to continued climate action and contributing to a better world shifting? And I had here, if at all, but I don't think I even need to include that with the three of you. And so who wants to start? Feel free to put up your hand or jump straight in, whatever you like.
Okay, I'm the one not on mute, so I'll start.
Go for it, Jane.
You know, I think I've already shifted a lot in the last 4 or 5 years in what I'm doing and the work I'm doing. I think increasingly I am seeing a need for us to be even more intentional and really revolutionary, really saying that the status quo, from organizational life to how we live our individual lives, really has to change. And so thinking deeply about how we do this on an individual level, and I see some things in the chat about, if I do more waste management or I drive a more fuel efficient car, that's a little bit, but it's clearly not enough. So I have two thoughts on this. Is that I have a friend who is a climate scientist, and I was sort of having a little bit of a complete breakdown about all of this months ago, trying to fix it all. That's what I do, is fix things. And he said, no, you can't fix it, but we all can and must do something. And so I live with that now, that every day I can't fix the whole thing, but I can do something and I must do something. So I think it starts with that. But then I think the other part that is really continuing to shift and grow for me is getting involved in a public policy standpoint. We need public policy to support the sort of actions we need. So there is a lot happening in water policy right now, and funding for sea level rise in particular, that these projects need to happen. We need to stop building housing on the bay margins. That is not the place we need them. We need to be doing more to preserve the bay and allow for sea level rise and the habitats that will require as well. You're going to hear the initials. I suspect increasingly you will hear EPR, which is Extended Producer Responsibility, which is basically saying we have to stop getting everything delivered to us in plastic. And if we do get it delivered to us in plastic, the producers of that plastic have to be responsible for how it gets back into the waste stream or managed. It should not be, this is not a consumer problem, it is a producer problem. So we need to shift that. And I think you'll be hearing more about that. And I had one more. Maybe I'll stop there. I do have one more. You're going to also be hearing a lot about the conversion from natural gas to electric. And for all the chefs out there and all the cooks out there that love their gas ranges, including me, it's time to start thinking about conversion. It's past time. It's really past time. And so my husband and I have decided that we will transition out of gas over the next few years. If you don't start doing it, it's going to be a public mandate. It's coming. So I'm not saying do it all at once, but I can see in here induction. Yes, induction. It's great. It's amazing. So that conversion from natural gas to electric, renewable electric energy is coming. And we
I
need
love
to
that you brought that up because it feels like it's been a conversation about a bunch of us, and I'm so scared to lose my gas stove. But yeah, I hear you. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. So my resolve to step up my efforts to, contributing to climate change is strengthening day by day as I get more educated about, about the challenges and the solutions. So as an entrepreneur and an investor, I'm looking to be part of or invest in companies that have an impact in achieving net zero goal directly or indirectly, and more importantly, started by women. As a community leader, I'm looking for ways to get my community educated and get involved and eventually influence policy making at a local government level. As a technologist, I'm truly fascinated by what we can achieve today. I started listening to TED Climate, which I highly recommend, by the way, gives a glimpse into the world of climate change solutions 5 minutes at a time. I heard about this particular organization called Climate Trace. This is a coalition of scientists, activists, and tech companies using satellite imagery, big data, and AI to monitor and transparently report on the world's emissions as they happen and speed up meaningful climate actions. Most importantly, it's free. It is run by volunteers. Everybody volunteers their time there. What is heartwarming for me is that most countries are indeed reporting in a truthful way, which I, to be honest with you, I did not expect that. And there are many more solutions that are being discussed on TED Climate. So today, every decision or every action I take, climate change became the criteria. I know some of you are talking about induction, and I was seriously looking into what is that I can do, to transition from gas to induction. So I also want to talk about why women should be leading these efforts and take a front row seat in this initiative. Statistically speaking, women make or influence many important decisions that set a future path at home, corporations, and governments. And our recent pandemic has proven that women leadership made all the difference. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows about how New Zealand, led by a woman prime minister, handled that. So we have many trailblazers who are already making a difference in policy making, science, technology, education, awareness, and activism. I'm sure everybody heard about the youngest activist, Greta Thunberg, right? So I do believe that, we, as everybody here was saying, individual actions are very important, but we also need to go beyond that and then start getting involved in community. And I want to actually, quote my favorite activist and environmentalist, Jane Goodall. One individual cannot possibly make a difference alone. It is individual efforts collectively that make a noticeable difference. all the difference in the world.
Ah, beautiful. She's one of my favorites.
Yeah, yeah. Me too.
Olivia, what do you want to add in there?
How shifting, I feel like I am the just plug my ears and uncover my pass the buck. You know, I've been working in social change and in nonprofits for years, but I haven't personally been as deeply involved in climate action as I could be. And I think part of the reason has been, as I mentioned earlier, my overwhelm at what is happening. And I think one thing that is changing in general in my life, and in particular related to climate action, is looking to women trailblazers, as Suba mentioned, looking to leaders like Jane and Suba and others who have been doing this work for a long time and seeing how they have been able to make progress and they've been able to affect change, and reminding myself that I can only do what I can do, but by looking to folks who are already in the movement and doing the great work and supporting them and taking their lead, I will be contributing to this effort. So in general, I'm trying to be less pessimistic. I'm trying to be a little bit more hopeful and a little bit more empowered around, like, I am one individual, but I'm one of many. And the little that I do might impact someone else, And that's really the best way forward, I think.
And it's so good. I always think of, if each of us can just do something small, what that impact already is. And I think you called this out earlier, just from the grassroots level. What is it that we can do locally and within our communities, and then just keep expanding. And I absolutely agree that I think as women, we've got to step forward and really take action. So I think before we go into the Q&A, oh my gosh, Becky, you're already ahead of me. Wonderful, thank you. We all need to find and use our voices for good. So we wanted to share the following ways to make a difference. I know there's loads of others. Jane shared this with us the other day in one of our discussions, and I thought it was so valuable for you all to have little nuggets of a dozen different ways to make a difference. And Olivia, you want to kick us off with the first three?
Yeah, happy to. So the first one, which I've been speaking to a little bit today, is around speaking up, and being aware of who your local representatives are, making sure that you are voicing your concerns about climate action and climate change, and asking them to make good decisions, voicing your concerns directly to your elected officials, sending messages that you care about this warming world. And encouraging Congress to enact new laws that limit carbon emissions and require polluters to pay for the emissions they produce. Secondly, and this is something that I'm actively looking into, if anyone has recommendations, power your home with renewable energy. So trying to look for a utility company that generates at least half of its power from wind or solar. And in addition to that, if you're not able to find a utility company that does do that, many utilities do offer other ways to support renewable sources on their monthly statements and websites. Thirdly, weatherizing your home. Heating and cooling are among the biggest uses of energy, and they account for almost half of your home energy use. You can make your space more energy efficient and save money by sealing drafts and ensuring it's adequately insulated.
Thank you. Suba, you want to take the next 3, 4, 5, and 6? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah. So number 4, invest in energy efficient appliances. Since they were first implemented nationally in 1987, efficiency standards for dozens of appliances and products have kept 2.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide out of the air. I don't think we actually think about this number. As I was looking through it, I'm like, oh my God, really? That's about the same amount as the annual carbon pollution coughed up nearly by 440 million cars. When shopping for refrigerators, washing machines, and other appliances, look for that Energy Star label. It will tell you which are the most efficient. And number 5, reduce water waste. Saving water reduces carbon pollution too. That's because it takes a lot of energy to pump, heat, and treat your water. So take shorter showers, turn up the tap while brushing your teeth, and switch to water sense label fixtures and appliances. The EPA estimates that if just 1 out of every 100 American homes were retrofitted with water efficient fixtures, about 100 million kilowatts of electricity per year would be saved, avoiding 80,000 tons of global warming pollution. That's a considerable number. Number 6, actually eat the food you buy and make less of it meat. Approximately 10% of US energy goes into growing, processing, packaging, and shipping food. About 40% of which just winds up in the landfill. This is so sad, guys. This is so sad. And since livestock products are among the most resource intensive to produce, eating meat-free meals can make a big difference too.
Oh, thanks, Suba. Jane, you want to grab the next 3, 7, 8, and 9?
Sure. I can't look at this buy better bulbs without thinking about standing at the hardware store, looking at the entire wall of light bulbs now. But there are a lot of choices out there. If you go with LED bulbs, which is what is recommended, that's 80% less energy than incandescent conventional light bulbs. So if you have some around your house, you might want to check 80% less energy on those old bulbs. And when you go to buy these bulbs, you're going to see they're a little more expensive than you've paid before, but over the life of the bulb, you'll save about $125. So it really is both financially and energy-wise a much better way to go. The number 8 is pull the plugs. We all do this, and I could probably look around this room right now and find multiple things plugged into an outlet that is on idle load, meaning we're not actually using it. If you added all that up around the country right now, we would be powering 50 power plants that we really shouldn't need. And I'm going to guess those power plants are not renewable energy. So let's see if we can get that down. Just unplug things when you don't need them plugged in. Whenever you see a light on a device, and there are so many of them, that means it's pulling idle load. And the last one, drive a fuel efficient vehicle. I don't know about anybody else, but I've been getting a lot of notices about, we would like to sell your car. We would like to buy your car because we want you to buy a new car. And my message to Volvo or BMW or anybody else is, I will do that when you have an electric car for me that I want to purchase. They tell me it's coming. There are supply chain issues, significant ones, but maybe late this year. But really look at those fuel efficient vehicles that we know there are more coming. And with the price of gas now, we really need them. I will say one thing about this, which is that it is the better energy choice to keep your old vehicle as long as it is operating at some level of efficiency, because making a new vehicle takes a lot of energy. So you want to sort of live the lifespan, but then go to a more fuel efficient vehicle.
And that's such a good point, because I think it's so easy in our world to keep feeling like we just buy new and buy better, but we have to think about what's currently existing. So I'll grab the last 3. Number 10, it says maintain your ride. This is about your tires. So if we keep our tires inflated, we could save 1.2 billion gallons of gas each year. So just a simple tune-up can boost the miles per gallon anywhere from 4% to 40%. And a new air filter will get you a 10% boost. So something to think about, just as simple as your tires. Also rethinking planes, trains, and automobiles. If you are living in a walkable, smart growth area, cities, towns where you can use public transportation, just with less driving, less money spent on fuel, and then of course, less pollution in the air. And obviously too, frequent flying can make a big difference to adding more pollution. So if you can avoid that, air transport is a major source of climate pollution, and take a train instead if you can, or just an alternate. Maybe you can even do a Zoom call instead of flying somewhere. And then 12 is shrink your carbon profile. You can offset the carbon you produce by purchasing carbon offsets, which represent clean power that you can add to the nation's energy grid in place of power from fossil fuels. But not all carbon offset companies are alike. So do your homework to find the best supplier. We're right at 11:54, so I want to open it up to our audience for questions, and also check in with Becky if you've got any from the chat that you want to bring forward. And we can close the deck, and I'll unpin so that everybody can see each other if you like.
I think the one thing that came through the chat, and thank you to everybody, the chat's been really engaged. Thank you, everybody, was around corporations and the amount of waste and being able to influence policy, particularly around corporations. As we as individuals are trying to do those things, this morning I was going to try to put air in my tires so I would get better gas mileage. But that feels like small contributions compared to folks who are using considerably more energy and producing considerably more pollution. So to our esteemed panel, some things too that we can affect policy and affect corporate policy changes.
It's a favorite conversation of mine, so I'll start. You know, again, this is what gives me hope, is that there's some really good things happening right now. Extended producer responsibility, which says producers have to be responsible for these plastics and other materials, that is making headway across the United States. And interestingly, it's happening at the local level and then the regional and state level. So don't think that you making a difference in your city or county doesn't start to add up. It does. San Mateo County is doing great work in this area about their plastics, you know, really reducing plastics and waste overall. So great leadership to the county on that, the Office of Sustainability. But I would say that for everyone to get, you know, to watch these issues, to write to your representatives at the state level and at the national level. But I will tell you, local and state, that's a good place to start. California will lead on this. And we really need to, all of us have a voice to do that. That's part of what we can do.
Yeah, I do agree with Jane on that, you know, so you start at a local level, and then, you know, that kind of spreads like a wildfire, because all these local governments and regional governments, they talk. And, you know, I participated in some of these discussions. They're like, what technology are you using? Or like, you know, how are you guys handling this? You know, so this, like, you know, whatever you do, even though it is the first time you're doing, that serves as a pilot for the rest of the, you know, state, if not for the entire country. So that's definitely good. I wanted to cite an example here. So our garbage, like, you know, the garbage, you know, collector, West Valley, recently collected these small, you know, like kind of like, you know, containers to collect the food scraps. And what's interesting, I mean, we've been composting for 5 years, so we always never have any food scraps to throw. But the thing that what I really was amazed at is it sparked a whole discussion on Nextdoor. Nextdoor is that, you know, the local community. And I mean, that's like so many, somebody asked a question, what is this for? And that's it. People started like giving advices and, you know, suggesting things. And the thing is that like a lot of the city officials are on Nextdoor, and they get this feedback, which is like really, really wonderful. So definitely starting local is a great starting point.
Any other thoughts on that? I know we're bumping up against 2 minutes till the top of the hour. And so I wanted to, I put in the chat, just feel free to join us at our 3 o'clock session on growing leadership with impactful communication. You can listen to our 10 a.m. session on women leaders working in the new norm. And I want to give a big shout out, thank you to Jane, Suba, Olivia, Becky behind the scenes helping with all the logistics. I am so grateful for you and I love this topic. I think we can just keep having this almost in a monthly conversation. We've talked about doing something as far as continuing in circles and discussions, and however we want to do that going forward. We'll certainly look into that as a commission and what we can do with that. Anybody want to add a final word before I stop recording and end our session?
Thanks to the county for putting this together. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you to the county and Anisha and my panelists. Like, this is such a great knowledge exchange, and I hope to get involved like in future and continue to continue this action. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.